From Southern California, this is The Circle of Insight, a show about everything in psychology. Hear the latest in news and views on psychology. Our motto is simple: wherever there is psychology involved, we are there. And now, here's your host of The Circle of Insight, Carlos Vasquez.
Welcome back, everyone, for part 2 of drum therapy. My name is Carlos Vasquez, doctoral candidate in psychology and the host of The Circle of Insight, where we discuss the topics you have chosen with leading experts. Our motto is simple: wherever there's psychology involved, we are there. Today we have Stephen Dole talking about drum therapy with a special co-host, Dr. Bob Weathers. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming today. What we're going to do is actually look at all the stuff that Stephen brought with him today. He brought us a lot of toys, I guess, in a sense,
yes.
A lot of drums, and we're going to learn what these drums can do in a very powerful therapeutic way. But first, let's learn a little bit about the drums.
Okay, so what we have here is a djembe drum. This is actually made from a tree, and with an animal skin, a goat skin over it. And this is a multi-purpose drum, and you see even some bands will use these today to add percussion. But in drum circles, we some people will do the heartbeat, you know. So that would be the heartbeat, and then the walking. And then it can get a little bit more fun. It's funny in drum circles, if I'm doing a workshop and I'll start something like that, and the people, they get all excited, but then I stop it because I'm doing like a lecture. And they go, oh, you got to continue that. You can't stop that.
I'm holding myself back. It's hard not to join in.
And then we can do a conversation between us, Bob. And then so if we were going to do...
What did you guys say to each other? That's the question I have to ask.
We had fun.
So what that does, that's right, that's fun. There's a connectedness going on, you're expressing. And so for this reason, and disorders like drug and alcohol rehab, and I've done this for homeless shelters, and teens who don't come out of their shell, it's contagious.
Yeah, I can feel the energy inside me right now.
Yeah, it's contagious.
We recently had a woman come to our university who spoke on this, and she's looking at the neurobiology of drumming. And Pamela Lynn Seraphin has written a book on this recently, and I can tell you that what she's talking about, I just experienced. None of us know that our dopamine or serotonin is rushing through our system, but I guarantee you that doing that stirs up all of that going on inside. It manifests as pleasure that you can imagine. If I'm an addict coming out of addiction, looking for some alternative to substance, which is how I've maybe maintained my pleasure, is here's a very powerful avenue in, and which is why it's so effective using it with addicts in recovery, because here's an alternative to getting high, because I don't know about you, but I just got high.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, there's research on that.
Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
To support that.
For sure.
Have you done that with the drug addicts as well? Have you helped them with that?
You know what? I actually wrote a paper on using drumming and drug and alcohol addiction, and so some of the things that I wrote about, what others have written about, is the vibration. So there's various mechanisms that go on. And so one of it was the camaraderie melody that we had. Then you have the free expression that you're putting things in sound or music that you can't put in words, but the actual vibration of the instrument affects us. And so those things collectively can cause secretion of certain hormones in the brain.
It's interesting you'd say that, because as I was playing this, I thought I had this at an angle, but it has a flatness to it. And it was only at the end that I tilted it far apart. Feel the difference of that?
Yeah.
Versus
Flat and powerful.
finally when I found that, then it dropped into the place you're talking about, Steve.
That's interesting. What else you have for us?
Okay, now, some of these instruments, and this is one, this is something that I could use one-on-one or in a group. This is called a buffalo drum or a frame drum, and this thing has its own sound.
I like that for the intro, Bob.
That the sound out of this becomes hypnotic.
Yeah, sure. Well, here the proof
That's another
is.
good. What is that?
Yeah, what was it like for you to hear that?
It was, in a sense, hypnotic.
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about the brainwaves and which ones it activates more so. If it activates the beta, well, actually not beta or alpha, I'm assuming it's going to be like the theta wave.
Well, what it does now, they've done
interesting.
remote-sponsored research for this, and what they found out is that in a drum circle, after 8 to 10 minutes of everybody playing a rhythm, that the group, the brain waves, the EEG patterns, would begin to all act alike.
Yeah.
They'll synchronize, huh?
Yes, and so what I'll do in a drum circle is if I think that it would be good to take everybody up to like a multitasking brainwave, like considered a beta level, I'll get the tempo up.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, when I get the tempo up, people are going like that, and if I try to bring them down, they don't want to go down. They're in that state.
Yeah.
And so there's an affinity. I think there's an affinity at different times of the day and for different groups and different settings to be in a particular EEG state.
Yeah.
And I spoke on a university at Wright State University 3 years ago. And so I think the fascinating aspect of it is in teaching, as a teacher, to use your intonations and your tempo as a lecturer or teacher to be able to affect the brainwaves for better learning of your students.
You remind me, about 25 years ago, I chaired a dissertation at a local university, and the student did her dissertation on music and therapy, psychotherapy. I'll never forget this. When she came into the final oral defense, I was her chair, and there were 2 or 3 other committee members, and she went around, and that was very courageous of her. She went around and she says, Carlos, and she described Carlos's intonation and his the musicality of your voice. Then he went to Stephen, and then he went to Bob. She went to Bob. It was really, she actually differentiated us and talked about us musically, and how it is that I never have forgotten that, how it is that, well, you talk the way you talk. We don't really think twice about it, but it communicates, and it's got a musicality in terms of pitch and rhythm, space and silence. All of that's communicated, and she nailed it. She had the kind of ear to be able to hear that difference. It was a fun way to start off the oral defense. It was totally unplanned, and it lasted all these years later.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
You leave me a couple questions.
Okay.
You were saying they were listening for 10 or 15 minutes and didn't want to stop listening.
Okay.
Is there a certain time that you use for your therapy in regards to the drums? I mean, do you go for 30-minute sessions? Is it dependent on the person?
The ideal, and people ask me this a lot, and so the ideal is 60 to 90 minutes.
Wow.
Because if I'm doing a drum circle and I'm doing a workshop, I'll spend sort of the first 15, 20 minutes, and people haven't done it before, just getting comfortable. They're figuring out the basics and starting to play. And so it's usually at the 20 or 25 minute point where they're starting to assimilate and figure out what it is. And so then at that point, I'm using some structured exercises for everybody to follow. And then so usually say at a 60-minute point, that's when I turn everybody loose. That's when they really start to improvisate and really get into it. So you can do it for 60 minutes, but you're only going to really have maybe 10 minutes if you do it for an hour. But if you do it for 90 minutes, you've got a whole half hour where you've gotten the basics down, you know what you're doing, and now you're starting to really play.
That's fascinating. Have you noticed anything in regards to their circadian rhythm, how they sleep, and how sleep patterns change after therapy with drumming?
I know the feedback I've gotten from people in homeless shelters and in drug and alcohol rehab, and from some people I've worked with with autism. And there's a number of things going on, from the free expression, the vibration. I did a fascinating little thing for a girl 2 years ago who had real severe cerebral palsy and autism. And so she had to be medicated all the time. She was in a diaper, she couldn't walk. And I started with her. I started with the clave, and I told you about this. I wanted it to be a little bit like the EMDR, and she watched every little thing I did. And just to capture her imagination. And so I would go from that, and then I would take one of the shakers, and do. And that kept her imagination. Now, this is a girl, a 12-year-old girl who was unable to speak. So she couldn't communicate. She was unable to walk. She was heavily medicated, and here's this guy in front of her playing this stuff, and her brain is able to grasp it, and she's totally engaged in it. I use that term all the time, engage. You have to engage. And so like I think in the last segment, my son asked me, Dad, how can you handle the music if you have a sensitivity to sound? I said, just like you can with motion sickness in a car, if you're driving, you're engaged. Yeah. Yeah. And if you've ever watched somebody get seasick on a boat, you can see their face. You watch their eyes. As a psychologist, you would know. You watch their eyes. And it's true, in sports, everything, you watch the eye contact and you can see when somebody disengages.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Just watch that point. And so now this is one of the fun instruments.
What is that?
Something like this could have been made 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Yeah. And it may have been.
What's that called?
It's called a thunder tube. And so, and it's interesting with all these instruments. A lot of people, they gravitate towards the big instruments, the bass drums.
There is something like that. I'm sorry, there is something like that. You probably come across this. The Australian Aborigines, is it called a bull striker? I don't remember the exact term, but they have something they fling around their head that it's almost like a sling, and it creates that kind of sound, and it goes all the way back. We'll have to compare notes, but it's close to that term, bull striker, but it's Aboriginal. Is that these sounds are in our marrow from the birth of our species.
It sure seems like it.
And of course, it's passed on.
Bull roarer. It's called the bull roarer. That's it. And you get the roar of that.
Is it to scare people away, or do you remember what it was?
It's spiritual, so it has its origins in the shamanic tradition. So it's either to scare away spirits or maybe to invite other kinds of spirits.
Hi, welcome to Delante. This is Delante Recovery, and my name is Yvette Kuglin, and I'm part of the staff.
Delante Recovery Center has helped people in dual diagnosis for 5 years. We accept most PPO insurances and provide luxury accommodations and 24-hour support. To speak with an admissions counselor, call 1-888-242-4450.
A lot of time we don't even know what's wrong with us, and sometimes we need to get away to figure that out. So if you want to go for a little retreat out in Corona Del Mar, which is a confidential location, we're here to help. So we're only a phone call away. Thank you.
These rhythms, I think, are passed on genetically. So modern music would say would be the last couple hundred years. And so there's been a lot of music done, it's been passed on. And so that would become part of our makeup because it's passed on, genetically. But when you do the drumming, say in a drum circle, what it comes from is called thought intent. Now, thought intent is when you're talking with someone And we use our body language, and we're thinking about, what we're saying, and we want that person to understand and feel and think about what we're trying to say. And so your thought intent becomes a key part of that, what we call the body language. And so in the drumming, yes, it's the sound. Well, oftentimes it's funny, especially in drug and alcohol rehab, the guys, they gravitate towards the big, loud drums. They think, if I get this big drum, people are going to hear me. It's almost like in life and in conversations, a lot of us feel like we're not heard. So we feel like we need to talk louder, and we got to do other.
So they won't reach for the little small thing.
Oh no, they go for the big. They go for the big stuff.
Now, what are those eggs?
These are kashishis.
Oh, the eggs.
And so this is a shaker egg. But I've come into a drum circle that's really, with 10, 15 people that's going full speed. And I've come in and taken over the rhythm and changed everybody with just a shaker egg. And so it's not the sound, it's your thought intent. And you can have a room full of people, right? It's funny in business. Now in business, it's whoever's the senior person in the room. Everybody kind of takes the heat from that person. In a social setting, you have certain people who are more the social leaders. But you can have a busy conversation, and in walks a small little child. And here's what's interesting. In nature, we are attracted to stuff that is unique and special. So if somebody starts playing something in a drum circle that's unique and special, it captures everybody's interest. So in a conversation room, if a child walks in and does something to capture the whole room, I don't care what the politics of it, that overrides the pressures that they'll be captured to that little child. Or in a group setting in a company, if the employee decides to speak up and with something unique and special, everybody's going to take notice.
That's fascinating.
And that's, I think, what's cool. I wish we had more of that today in the world. And that's the free exchange of information. And we're attracted to things that are cool. And I guess in the tech world, they call it going viral, right? Everybody wants their concept to go viral, their tweet or whatever to go viral.
Now, we're going to get to now the therapy component. Unfortunately, we don't have time to listen to all the beautiful instruments you have here. Who can this help? What individuals, what kind of mental health disorders does this help?
Well, Carlos, so it's used a lot in drug and alcohol rehab. I've been in the last few years. I've been doing a lot more with seniors and senior living facilities.
Oh, it does help a little bit with Parkinson's, I've read.
Yes.
Alzheimer's.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Have you used it with anybody?
Yes. In Parkinson's, I've seen it, and other people who are facilitators have written about it. The people with Parkinson's will change their shaking to the rhythm we're playing. And the experts say that they can't control it. Well, they will change it to what the rhythm that we're playing.
I've seen it with people that have been diagnosed in later stages of Alzheimer's that otherwise seem catatonic, seem non-responsive. And you start up with a rhythm, and all of a sudden they perk up and they're there and alert and can join you. It's really quite remarkable.
Any ideas?
Music gets through. Was it?
Any ideas psychologically why that would happen?
Well, one of them that I think of is that it bypasses the verbal. It bypasses the verbal, and that may be really attenuated in late stage dementia, for example. But it doesn't mean that the soul is gone. It just means that accessing left brain thinking and the verbal dimensions isn't available. And as soon as you move into rhythm, you're getting right through that. And it does communicate. I loved your piece on thought intent. It communicates thought and engagement or entrainment, but bypasses the verbal. So if that's gone, it doesn't mean I can't communicate. You just have to be skillful in finding a way to communicate to me. And music and rhythm specifically is a very powerful or effective medium for doing that, right? That's exciting.
Yes. And then what they write about seniors and dementia is that the last thing to go will be the long-term memory. And so when you're doing this, it'll bring up old. I've seen my mother, who's getting up in the years now, just out of nowhere remember a song and complete lyrics, everything from years ago.
It's really extraordinary.
That's amazing. Now, you said you worked with addicts. You worked with seniors. You said you worked with homeless.
Yes.
How did you help them?
I was doing, for about 8 months, this is a couple of years ago, I was doing monthly drum circles at the Friendship Shelter in Laguna Beach. And so in a lot of that, I guess the residents have drug and alcohol issues. And so, I believe I'd seen a couple of the residents go into what we call trance heightened states. And there's been papers written about that. And because their eyes go dark, the pupils get so big, the eyes go dark and they have like a stare. So when they're playing, they're not really seeing or responding to you. They're in another place.
They're actually in a hypnotic state.
They're in a hypnotic state. And then when they come out of it, whatever it's 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they go, wow.
Has that improved? That it helps them?
Oh, yeah.
Fascinating. It's really
And I think for me, if I'm with some other drummers and I get into a 6/8, a 6/8 rhythm, oh, it is to me, it is captivating. Oh, I don't know how much time we have.
Well, we have about 2 minutes. What I want to try to do is towards the end, when we're getting ready to wrap up, I'd love to have you guys end the show.
We'll do a 6/8.
Oh, I will get you guys addicted.
End the show with a 6/8.
Okay.
So I guess the key question now is, we know we can help a lot of people. It seems to be therapy isn't commonly used. How is it accepted in the profession of psychology? Have you had a lot of resistance towards it? Have you had a lot of, how would you say, welcoming arms?
You know, there's been some papers, I think, become more mainstream in the last few years, and probably within your field, in psychology and psychiatry. It's being recognized in drug and alcohol rehab and in seniors.
Let me mention an article just because it's significant. The premier journal in psychology in America is just called American Psychologist. It's published by the American Psychological Association. And one of our local friends, Roger Walsh, who's a psychiatrist, works at UC Irvine, published an article that was a lead article in American Psychologist just a couple of years ago. And it was an article on what he called lifestyle interventions. And what he did in that is he summarized realms that psychology tends not to touch on that have a lot to do with our mental and physical health. That includes prayer and meditation, it includes altruism, altruistic acts, it includes our engagement with the arts, nature, but specifically talking about music. And so he summarizes tons and tons of research that's coming out to support alternative approaches to psychological, mental, spiritual health. And for it to be published in American Psychologist, I'm only mentioning that because it's very significant. It's the most conservative organ in American psychology, published a lead article on all of these interventions, including what Stephen's talking about today. So in that sense, it is gradually beginning to sift into the profession.
It's amazing. I mean, it has a lot of power, and we've spoken about it before. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left, but I know we've talked about it before, where they've even used, I think it's drumming or percussion for sinister purposes. We've talked about that, and even some training.
To torture people.
To torture people.
You
So
see
it does
in
have
football,
powerful.
NFL football in college, the stadium noise, becomes difficult.
Yeah, so that's something that's really powerful.
I used to torture my parents with it when I was very young.
Well, if people want to get in touch with you, how would they get in touch with Stephen for help?
So my website is Dolly Communications. That's DOLLE, and then communications with an S.com. And I've had this site up for about 10 years. I have quite a bit of content.
Great.
Or they can search my name, Stephen Dolly, Stephen with a PH.
So if you want to contact Stephen, you can reach him at StephenDolly.com, StephenDolle.com.
Or DollyCommunications.com.
Or Dolly Communications. Well, thank you so much, Stephen, for coming on the show. It was a great, great show. Unbelievable. Thank you, Dr. Weathers, for helping me.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Once again, if you want more information about the Circle of Insight, you can go to Facebook.com/Circle of Insight, where you can look at daily updates. Look to see if you post comments about today's show or any previous shows, and look to see upcoming shows. Our next show will be discussing healthy lives and healthy families with Donna Schuler. But before we go, I'd love to have Dr. Weathers and Stephen lead us out with a 6/8.
Here we go.
You start the pattern right here with it. Now I know how to get this thing to sound good.
Okay. Feel free to grab any of these shakers, like the shakers and clave. So the easiest way to say it's like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And what you're going to do, you're going to alternate hands. So it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now you just, when you go full speed, it's this.